All right, we grabbed some data with the use query hook and React query. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a user with the use mutation hook. So let's go back to the code editor and we're going to add some stuff here. First, we need another function for React query to use to add the mutation. So I'm going to create that one outside of the app component itself. Const add user equals, this one is going to be async also. React query needs a function that will return a promise. And for this one, I'm going to take in a parameter that I call user. I wrap it in a try and catch block just as before, because React query also need you to actually throw an error. Otherwise, it won't catch the error in this variable here. So very important to actually throw an error. And inside here, I'm going to throw new error. And we have the error. Okay, so inside the try block, I'm going to return. I await one time, then I have the parenthesis. I'm going to put this on its own row. I await again. And if you don't know why I await 2 times by now, you can check the previous video where I'll explain it for you. But in short, the first await is for actually converting it to JSON, because that one is also async, and then I await the fetch itself. So await fetch, I have a string https //res.in/API/users. It's the exact same endpoint as here. We use that one for faking this adding user also. Then inside of the fetch here, I have a comma, and I'm going to provide it with some information, some headers and stuff. So I create an object with curly brackets. I set the method, the post, the body, colon. I'm going to JSON stringify. I want to send it as a string, parenthesis. I have the object with the data that I want to send along with this post. First underscore name is going to be user.first_name. And you can see here, this is how the endpoint works. It wants this one here that's called first_name. And from the user that I'm going to send into this one, it's going to be an object where I provide it with the first name and the last name. I grab the first name for that one. I actually don't like to use underscores like this, but the API is structured this way, so it uses underscore. So that's why I use it here also. Otherwise, I want to use camel casing instead. Last_name is going to be user.last_name, right? Then just after this last parenthesis here, I have a comma, and I'm going to set the headers in an object with curly brackets. I set the content -type, colon. I have another string. I set it to application /JSON, semicolon, and charset equals UTF-8. I'm not sure if you need to provide all of this, but I think you should do it anyways, because it's always a good idea to provide this information. But some APIs don't need it, but I think it's needed here when we send along this data in the body. All right, so one more thing that I forgot here is that we had to convert this one to JSON like this. I think I may have messed something up here. I forgot a parenthesis, I think. Method post stringify. Yeah, I should have a parenthesis there also. Okay, so I put this on its own row. Again, the order format messed some stuff up here. So I have the await, and then I need that parenthesis there. Do some auto formatting. So this is how it should be structured, I think. So you have a parenthesis here with all this fetch stuff, and it's that one that's going to be converted to JSON. So very careful here. Just look at this for a second to see that you get it correctly. Then I have the fetch, and that parenthesis ends here. And this is the object for setting all the data in the fetch. So I think this should be it. Okay, so that's our add user function that we're going to use for React query. So now we move down inside of the app component itself, just below here, where we grab the data, we can create a mutation. Create a mutation for adding a user. Right, and then we create the mutation const. Destructure out some stuff here. We have something that's called mutate, and we have another thing that's called mutateAsync. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. We have the isLoading. We can't have the same name here, so we have to rename this one to something else as we're using it up here in the use query. So is adding user, I rename it to that, and we have the error, and this one we also need to rename add error equal. We call the useMutation, and we provide it with some stuff. We have the add user function, comma, and then we have an object. We're going to add some stuff in this object, but of course I also have to import the useMutation up here. So that's what I'm going to do, useMutation. So we provide the useMutation with the function that we created, the add function that we created. Then I have a comma, and then we have an object here that will provide us with some lifecycle stuff that we can use. For example, we have something that's called onSuccess. And this one will trigger when we have successfully created a mutation. So if we go back to the documentation here and check for the mutation down here, and we scroll down, you can see that you have some different, it's maybe not life cycle. They call it mutation side effects. So that's probably what I should call it also. So we have the onMutate, we have the onError, onSuccess. So this is the one that I use, and onSettled. OnSuccess will trigger when we successfully have made a mutation. So what you probably would want to do when you add something to a list, for example, as we do now, here we have this list and we want to add a person to this list. You probably want to update this list also when you have done the mutation. And for now, we can use something that's called Refetch in the use query. So I'm going to destructure that one out. You can use this one to refetch this query. So onSuccess, this one, we can give a function that will be called with the data, the variables, and the context. I'm not using the variables and the context now, but the data, we can console log that one out. So I'm just adding this stuff to show you what you get back here. The data is what's essential for us now, because please note that this is a fake API. It won't actually add some data. So that's why I console log it out here to see what we get back, that the actual mutation is working. In a real API, it will, of course, add a user to the database. But in this case, we will get back some data showing us that, yeah, the mutation worked, but it won't actually add a user to the data. So if I run Refetch, nothing will happen here, actually, because, it's the same data we fetch. It won't add anything, but we can at least see the data, and that way we can see that the mutation works. I will show you another way of doing this. Instead of using Refetch, we're going to use the query client and update the data, update the cache, but I will do that in another video. So this is the mutation. We get this one back, mutate and mutateAsync. These ones we can use to start the mutation, to initiate the mutation, and we need a button for that. So I'm going to create a button down here at the top. I create a button. I create an onClick handler, and I have an inline function, very important. We don't call mutate directly. We have an inline function, and that's because I want to send along some variables. I want to send along the user that I'm going to create. So I have an object, because if you remember in the function that we created up here, we take in a user as a parameter. We have an argument that we send in here that's with the user, and that's going to be an object where we get the first name and the last name. So this is the object that I send in here. First underscore name is going to be React query. Then I have a comma, and last underscore name is going to be rules. And maybe an exclamation mark to be extra cool. And then we end the button like this. And also you can see that we have the loading state here is adding users. If we want to display something when we're adding a user, we can do that here. For example, we check if is adding user. Then we're going to display a p tag that says adding user. Otherwise, we display nothing, we display null. And also error, it's called add error. So in this if statement, we can also return something if it goes wrong. And this mutateAsync, I will show you this in a second. But for now, this will work. Hopefully, we have created our add user function. We use the useMutation hook here, where we get this mutate function back that we're going to use to mutate. So this is the function that we call on the button click. We use this side effect here that's called onSuccess. It will provide us with the data that gets back and some variables if we have them and the context. So I console log out the data, and then I refetch the data to update the list. But in our case, it won't show because it won't actually add some data because this is fake API. So go back to the application. Yeah, probably should have some text in the button also. So this one shouldn't self-close. Add user. And then we close the button. Save it. Go back to the application. And we have this button here, add user. So I click it to see here. And here is the data that we get back. You can see created at first name React query, last name rules, and we get an ID. So we know that our mutation works. But as you can see, we're refetching the data, but it won't show here. And this is just because this is a fake API. And you can see also adding user, it's showing this when the actual mutation is running. So that's pretty sweet. Everything is working as it should. And this is pretty much the basics of mutations in React query. We have this one here that's called mutateAsync that I prefer to use actually. This way we can create our own function instead. So I'm going to create const handle user here. It's going to be an async function like this. Then I'm going to wait mutateAsync. So I call this function here. It's going to have the exact same data as we have here for the mutate1. This is the data that we send along to our mutation function. And then I can console log out. This was an async mutation like this. And then I'm going to refetch. Something like this. And this means that we actually can remove this stuff here like that. Because now we're mutating and then we can do whatever we want because we await this one and then I can refetch it afterwards. And if we want, we can also put this in a const data equal. So we can console log out the data also, just as we did before. Do some auto formatting. And down below here on the bottom, we're not going to call this mutate. We're going to call the mutateAsync function instead. No, it's not called mutateAsync. Of course, I should call my handle user, handle add user, not handle user, handle add user. That's the one I should call on the bottom. So save it, go back, click add user, reload it, add user. And there you can see this was an async mutation and we have the data here. So we have the exact same functionality, but we're using mutateAsync instead. And then you can specify it inside of your own functions instead of using these side effects that you get back here. So that's what I'm using all the time when I do my mutations. I think it's a better API for me, but it's highly opinionated, of course. So if you prefer the other way, you can use that one instead. All right, so that's useMutations. If you like this one, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications because tomorrow I'm going to release another video in this series on React Query.